Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It is Tuesday, January 27th, 8:56 in the AM, and we are going to be talking about the legalities that are occurring as we speak in Minneapolis. Those of you who have been following the story outside of the usual lies and misconceptions and things of that nature know that we are on shooting number two. And of course, this guy is going to be the guy that they'll push through as much of their hoo-ha as they possibly can, as the first woman was not such a good candidate. This one, you already had people in the media who didn't understand the situation, running their mouths and thereby poisoning the pool, as we say. And there's a feeling that the state is going to try to make an attempt to get their hands on this federal agent to try him for murder. Just a thought. It's been kicked around by a few of them because as these people become more drunk with power, they feel that the state power supersedes the federal agencies in this kind of a case. Could be one of the reasons that a lot of these federal ICE agents were rotated out at the time that Commissioner Holman decided to be put in charge of the Minneapolis operation. Either way, there is a lot of information taking from what we realized on yesterday's report about the silent majority for voting, which is that the Democrats probably will not win the midterm election unless they can get the American citizens to buy their bullshit in the PR campaign that they are running or the disinformation campaign that they are running. The win will probably go to law and order because people are tired of this nonsense. There are a number of things that are occurring in uh, Minneapolis and Minnesota in general. It's too much to really put down succinctly in a little video. I would suggest you go to www.southfloridaconservative.com. We'll have all the written work there for you. There's also a Substack. I'll put the links for them in here, and you can get the actual information so you can use it for later on. That being said, the big case is going to be what they're going to do about this last shooting and the amount of rioting, this, that, and the other thing. But for those of you who are just going to believe what is told to you on X, I'll have a couple things for you right now so that we can get past that and move on to other things. Okay, first of all, if somebody tells you that the state of Minnesota is trying to get their hands on this federal agent to process whatever for murder, manslaughter, what have you, because the police chief of Minneapolis has been making noises to that effect. They've gone out to the crime scene, which is kind of funny because the crime scene's been trampled to death, and they also don't have any of the real evidence except for whatever they're going to do with an autopsy. And what's that going to do, right? Really quick, the criminal issues with this kind of thing, and this is why you saw Obama and Biden use federal agents for so much. Murder charges are very hard to sustain. States are not legally, they're not legally barred from prosecuting federal agents for state crimes, even when federal investigators deem a shooting justified. Dual sovereignty allows parallel systems to operate. If I sound like a robot, these are important things for you to have. This is not my opinion. This is the deal. But practical barriers dominate. Federal agents act under federal authority. DOJ controls the evidence, witnesses, and internal records. Removal to federal court is often immediate. Immunity doctrines and supremacy principles narrow prosecutorial options. The state may announce intent to prosecute long before it can prove a case. Case in point, Ruby Ridge. Case in point, Waco, Texas. If you forgot about those, that is the same situation. Federal agents up against locals inside of a state, but on federal issues. All right. So that for those of you who remember that, and that was all Clinton's work, right? So the use of federal agents in that situation worked out the way it worked out, and now you're going to have you're getting the same again, okay? So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The prosecution problem is going to be, if they were to still push that, criminal murder charges require proof beyond a reasonable doubt, evidence that use of force was not reasonable under the circumstances, which right there, they're not going to win. Overcoming law enforcement deference in split decision seconds. Okay. Split second decisions. I'm sorry. He's going for your gun. He's going for a gun. He's got to be shot because he's obviously, if he's going for a gun, he's going to shoot you. Don't want to hear about the phone. It doesn't matter. Okay. You guys have to learn this is how stuff works. I don't like a lot of things. I know it's the law. You have to put up with it unless you're going to change the law. Even politically sympathetic juries are going to have an issue to convict when the video is ambiguous. The decedent initiated the confrontation. Agents were under documented threat or stress, which for that right there, let me tell you, that turns into an entirely different thing, as we've discussed, when the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, the police department of Minneapolis, the fire department, everybody has decided to collude to form a very stressful and toxic workplace, incredibly dangerous as well for the federal agents to operate in. The level of threat that is occurring to these federal agents can be proven, hopefully in a courtroom later on a different case, to have been a majority cause of the governor, the mayor, and the chief of police, and that they should all be banged up legally, for lack of a better term. So as a result, these criminal cases often stall at the grand jury review level or pretrial motions or jurisdictional disputes because there's no way this is going to get tried in the state of Minneapolis, not with the situation that's going on. So why the state would probably threaten the charge? Because the entire state's guilty of corruption, it seems. The mayor and the governor are probably both involved in this giant corruption scandal. But you have to go with the regular things, which is going to be threatening prosecution serves non-judicial purposes. They've got the troops in the street, right? You have to signal to the resistance that we're out there to F the federals, right? It transfers political blame when it fails, which is we tried to do it, but obviously we need to overthrow the federal government to get this done correctly, which is what they're going to hear on the street. It keeps pressure on federal leadership and it feeds legitimacy to civil claims, which is what I've been talking about for 2 years. Criminal law here functions as leverage. It is not an expectation that it's going to have a positive outcome for the people charging it. Now, on the other hand, the civil lane, civil suits don't need guilt. They only need to have doubt. A wrongful death claim has a low burden of proof, can proceed even if no criminal charges stick to that shooter. In this case, it allows narrative framing without conviction, and for opposing movements, the civil court offers discovery, media-friendly filings, and a longer lifeline to sustain attention. That's why civil litigation is the preferred theater, or should be the preferred theater. Maybe not for these guys, but for anybody countering this opposition, trust me, that's the way to go. Don't rely on the government to save you. Somebody destroys your storefront and the mayor said, good job, you sue the mayor. Trust me on this one. This is going to be how it works out. It doesn't seem like it's justice, but enough things get laid on somebody's doorstep, other people are going to say, we cannot tolerate this. So what they're going to want to have, and this is why they're doing it, is the discovery process. The civil plaintiff's strategic goal, meaning the people that are opposing the federal government in this case, is rarely going to be the damages. Instead, discovery is going to be used to check out the training standards, the rules of engagement interpretation, internal communications, command decisions. If there is fatigue or stress asset, like this guy's on the edge, prior incidents nationwide. Have people been doing this before? Has he done this before, he or she? Even denied discovery requests are going to generate headlines. Federal government refuses to turn over documents, right? We don't see that on other things like 40, what is it, 30 some Democrat states refuse to turn over the voter rolls. But that would be what you would try to get. Discovery becomes an optics engine. It's not just a legal process. So the thing is, why federal government defendants resist discovery successfully is another reason why the jailhouse lawyers in the street that are always asking for warrants don't get it. And that's why ultimately, when they keep getting shot down by agents, they should be turning around and suing the NGOs that are paying them, or once again, the establishment figures that are putting them in the way of federal bullets. Federal defense mechanisms are specifically designed to limit exposure. Let me get that right in my head. There's a thing called the Westfall Act substitution. West, the direction, fall, the thing, act. Look it up. And that replaces the agent with the United States. Okay, so look it up and you'll understand what that is, what we're talking about. The F, as in FTCA, okay, constraints, eliminate injuries and, I'm sorry, eliminate juries and punitive damages. The TOUHY regulations allow agencies to deny or delay disclosures, privilege assertions, law enforcement, deliberative actions. It's work product. You're not allowed to see it. And stays pending jurisdictional or immunity rulings. There could be a billion stays because there's nowhere in the state of Minnesota I would allow this case to be tried. As these mechanisms engage, civil discovery narrows sharply, and it will frustrate the plaintiffs who expected wide access because that is what would happen if it was you and I. If I shot you in the street, you could get after all kinds of different stuff in my life. Or if I was not at the mailman, if I worked for the water department and I shot you, right? We would see what the water police get up to in their free time, as long as it was a city or state water department, not the federals. So the critical timing window here is where the damage can occur. The only truly dangerous phase for the federal side is going to be early civil litigation, which is before removal is finalized, substitution is granted, which is what we're saying. You have to substitute the agent for the federal government. Excuse me. Lost my spot there when I did that. Sorry about that. Basically, as we said, it's going to be done right in that section. It is the earlier they could get in on this, the more likely it is that they'll get some traction. And if the plaintiffs, which is the families of the shooters or whoever, can get early depositions, uncontrolled document releases, or partial disclosures leaked to the media. Well, I would assume that they're going to get all the documents that have been generated by the city of Minneapolis, like it or not, they're going to have that. But that's not going to have too much because the city of Minneapolis has not been on speaking terms with the federal government. Now, there's going to be leaks because the DOJ leaks like a fucking sieve, right? Homeland is a little bit better, but the thing is, the documents that have been in Washington are under the purview of a bunch of idiots that would easily turn these things over. So you're going to get leaks to the media, and they're going to have various issues with documentation. So basically, all they can do at that point is damage the reputation of the ICE unit and probably of the ICE agent himself if they haven't already doxed him. Okay. So, how do you look at this? And in fact, we're going to put in the description, I'm going to put a thing that describes the media tells. Okay. And you'll see who's doing what, when, and where. It's probably the best way for me to do this because otherwise you're going to forget what it is we're talking about. But the fact of the matter is, the the issues that are going to occur. And if you go onto the site, we're also going to have the other optional things that are going to happen in the meantime. The federal government, and it throws me off once in a while too, because you got to keep your mindset of what's really occurring here. The federal government has to play 100% law and order for this to work in their favor, which means every time these guys are out in the street doing everything, calling you whatever name, throwing shit at you, you have to react at a certain level. Everybody would like to think it's the 60s and we can go out and crack everybody's skull, which is what they deserve, but it's not going to cut it for you today. What is occurring is they are generating large lists of names. They're generating where these idiots are from. And at some point down the line, they're going to close the trap on them. And then they're going to have to realize that they are in a world of shit because these are all federal charges. And a lot of them are going to be close to insurrection. Now, what you have to look at now is how these politicians are going to change in the next few weeks. Walz has activated the National Guard unit. He has a group of National Guardsmen in, I would consider, a blocking position across from one of the federal buildings that is being used to supply some type of logistics issues for the teams. Okay. If Walz decides that he is going to push them out of their encampment and physically block convoys or things like that or harass them, he is in a world of shit. And that is what the feds are probably waiting for. Walz, on the other hand, being semi delusional, and of course, at the bottom of this gigantic Somali corruption pool, has to realize he doesn't have a lot of good options here. You know, he's looking at a long time in jail if he gets put in with these Somalis. If he goes for insurrection, he's looking at a long time in jail there. People are starting to go back and look at his 20 trips to China. How did he have this big house when he was a high school sports teacher or something like that? There's a lot of things that are coming apart in Mr. Walz's life, but you don't see them on the mainstream media because the mainstream media is trying to change your perception of reality, much as they do with the statements that they're going to win the midterm. And some of the people, including some of Walz's people, believe that. They have to believe it because otherwise, 20 years in a federal prison, and it won't be a nice one, it won't be a country club, it'll be the high rise in New York or something like that. He better start doing some pull ups and doing some sit ups. So that's what we have for this for now. I'm expecting the murder charge, or at least the threat of a murder charge, and it'll come from outside. As you've already seen, some of the media people are going in that direction. Why aren't they charging him at the state level? And if that comes up, then you know what the game is. The game is to try to add leverage. The game is going to be to try to get the guys in the streets just a little more crazy and have them bash up some more stuff because when you believe in tantrum politics, which is what these guys believe in, you keep banging your head and throwing your spaghetti on the floor and you're going to get your own way. What we are going to see happen is there are tiers, and it's discussed in the paper side of this. There are tiers of control and influence operating in the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota as far as this operation against the federal government. Now, people like Promethean will tell you it's been operators brought in from other places. I'm saying you could probably have had a couple, but we had 20 years of training of these cadres. Maybe not necessarily in the United States. Maybe they've traveled abroad, who knows? But the fellows that are operating the real street war, that are attached to the NGOs that are getting paid to do this, are not to fool around with. I'm not saying they're better than our boys. I'm saying that you are up against qualified cadre that are out there to do a job in urban warfare. If you saw, I would suggest you start looking at S2 Underground if you haven't seen S2 Underground on YouTube. He also has on his page, if you go to the links, he will have, I think, I don't know if he what style he's using, but he'll have an incident map for the city. He has an incident map for the country. He has an incident map for the city of Minneapolis. And you can see where now that Antifa has shown up, they have taken up their blocking positions around that area. Antifa probably being As I said, the more trained cadre types, they probably already had people there, on the edges helping set this up, coordinating with the NGOs. The NGOs supplying the money and the equipment, as you've seen with the tear gas masks and all this other stuff. And the funny thing is, people don't realize that the federal government can watch all these purchases be made. You just don't order 150 tear gas masks from anybody, and it doesn't tick a box or raise a red flag somewhere. So anyway, that's what we have for you for now. Any questions, comments, please get in touch with us. This is something that is really important for you to understand, and you just, like I said, you're not going to be able to argue with people. The people that you know that need to have information in their lives, yes, that's great. If you want to keep memeing them, because I'll tell you what, the left has no sense of humor about itself at all. So there you have it. Otherwise, have a good day. Tuesday, January 27th. Talk to you later.